Welcome to a 2024 presidential election prediction. We've got 50 states that we got to predict, but we also have a bunch of different mitigating factors that really show the race kind of changing in its paradigm. One where we saw Biden having the lead for years. In fact, Donald Trump has never led in the popular vote for more than a week in the past 8 years. And yet, as of the last several months, we've seen this actually change. And so, as we see the support crystallize and really get cemented, we see that the paradigm again shifts in a major way. And we're going to get right into the reasons why this is the case. For starters, we're going to begin with a map that looks like this. While a lot of people may say that there's some swing states that are already colored in, we for certain almost guarantee that certain states are going to go red no matter what. And so I think for starters, we need to acknowledge that Iowa is not a swing state. It's not a contention. Texas is not even close. Florida is not even close. And that's a huge one, 30 electoral votes. And mind you, we have other states that I'm very confident in going forward, whether that be Georgia or North Carolina. Now, these states are really key insofar as, of course, they are tantamount to victory in 2020, but are now looking like states that Trump's going to easily win in this upcoming election, which shows the paradigm shifting to begin with. Whereas Trump had to play defense in like about 5 or 6 states in 2020, we're looking at him really just playing offense on like 3 or 4 states in 2024. And so the math is completely different. Mind you, this sort of screenshot in time is having to do in particular with the fact that Donald Trump, in terms of litigation in regards to the 88 felony counts that the liberals so like to loft over people's heads, like a sword of Damocles, that it's completely ineffectual, a completely dull blade, by the way. They like to say, well, he's under this threat, but it's pretty clear as of recently that these sort of charges are not really going to stick for a myriad of different reasons. However, manipulated the circumstances are about this trial, or the jury pool, or where the jurisdiction of where this is being tried is currently in New York City, we know for a fact that the trial is in and of itself looking really bad for Dems. In fact, we have people in CNN admitting as such, and this was a couple weeks ago. Now, keep in mind, folks, that we have the paradigm shifting in a myriad of different ways already. One being that the trial is going really bad for Dems, especially when we have Michael Cohen, their one guy who they needed to testify and actually hold his own, and he clearly did not. So let's get into the next factor. Now, top Biden campaign officials hold a Zoom call with Haley supporters hours after she endorsed Trump. So this is the cope. This is the spin. The common theme was they feel homeless and they need a reason to vote for Biden. A lot of them are just not there yet. And so think about that. If you're having a Zoom call with Haley supporters, these are people that are diehard anti-Trump people, and even they don't have a reason to vote for Biden. This is the equivalent of calling all the ex-girlfriends of a guy running for mayor, and even they are like, I don't have a reason to not vote for my ex-boyfriend for mayor. It's like, what the, like, this is the prime demographic here. You need these Haley supporters to vote for Biden to even have a chance, because when we look at the polls, you'll get the message immediately that Trump is winning by about a 1 percentage point in the popular vote, which is insane. Again, this is not factoring in RFK, if only because RFK has fallen off, and without the possibility of debate, plus him having a worm issue in his brain. Obviously, that's old, but it's kind of funny when you bring it up. But even more so than that, the fact that he sounds like an audible version of an Etch-a-Sketch, it becomes more evident that the guy never had a chance to begin with. And now that I'm out of the closet just saying that, it's very obvious that RFK does not have a chance at winning. And so anyway, we're not going to factor him into this election because clearly he's going to fall off. It's going to be like a luxury store edition of the Gary Johnson 2016 campaign, where of course the third party is a little bit bigger than usual. It's above the 1 percentile to like the 3 or 4 percentile. But realistically speaking, anybody with a brain that prefers Trump over Biden will vote for Trump and not some third party guy, which gives Biden a better chance. Let's give some more rationale as to my decision making, okay? So first of all, while Georgia in the aggregate seems to be less favorable for Trump as compared to Arizona, I'm more confident in Georgia going red for a couple of different reasons. If you look into the bones of why somebody like Brian Kemp won, I think that coalesces more with the Trump movement than does actually Herschel Walker or somebody like Kelly Loeffler, and I think that's very evident. Now, what it's even more important to point out, though, is that Arizona does have an X factor, that X factor being, of course, the variable of the abortion clause, okay? This petition in Arizona that has signatures to be on the ballot, I believe, is going to be a big issue for Republicans. And while I think Trump is going to trump those obstacles, I do think that it's going to be more of a ask for him to really flip Arizona back to red. And so for that to be the case, I think it's more likely, in my opinion, for Georgia to be safe red. But just proceeding my logic, I still think it's going red, which moves me on to the next state that's super red, and that's going to be Nevada. Now, Nevada is definitely a state that people didn't see coming. But if you really looked at the bones of the campaign, you saw that Nevada voted to the right of of the country in 2020. And so it's pretty evident that it's going to go red as long as Trump wins at all. And so that's really, really, really clear. So, when consulting the paradigm drift, we obviously can concur that while, of course, it's not a lock in win for Trump at this point, we can obviously tell that with the 268 electoral votes that I'm like 95% sure he'll get, it seems like he's likely to win. Now, again, 268 is not necessary insofar as it's not going to necessarily give him the win. That being said, though, it all comes down to Nebraska 2nd District. Now, Nebraska 2nd District is somewhat fruity insofar as that is to the left of what I think the popular vote will be. Now, the question is by how much, and so it's really hard to pin down what the results are. If you look at the 2016 election, or even more recently, as of 2 years ago, it was a dead even result for a guy like Don Bacon, who is a little bit more palatable, let's say, than Donald Trump when it comes to the majority of different people being pulled, which is to say, of course, that it's a tough ask for Trump to win Nebraska 2nd. But if Don Bacon is on the ballot, and obviously Joe Biden sucks to the point that even the never Trump people in the Republican primary, like the Nikki Haley supporters, are not really willing to vote for him, then it becomes more clear that Trump's going to win this. Now, keep in mind, if it's a 269 election result, you'll often concur with the fact that, of course, it becomes more clear to me personally that when it comes down to the House state delegations voting, most of those are Republican last time I checked, and so that would be a Trump win just right now. But to move on, we have Minnesota, which I think goes blue for a couple of different reasons. I think Minnesota, by and large, has been really hostile to Republicans overall. That's even with the elections of people like Keith Ellison, people that are just objectively trash candidates. And yet we still have people like Amy Klobuchar on the ballot for Senate in 24, and she is an amazing politician when it comes to the electoral vote at the end of the day. And when it comes to popularity on that basis, that substitute teacher looking ass is going to drag Biden over the edge, and it's really evident that it's going to be the case. And also, I don't see the Trump campaign spending any money here because it just doesn't make sense. If I were Trump, I would spend the money on Pennsylvania, Michigan, and probably Wisconsin in that order. That being said, of course, we have a couple of other states to consult in this case. Also, when it comes to Maine at large, I don't think this would be a decisive vote. I think you could say Biden wins that because it went for him last time by several points, I believe. And so we can just leave it as is. But when it comes to these other states, I think New Hampshire also mathematically doesn't really play a factor into this. The reason why I say this is because New Hampshire, while obviously, like if Trump's at 269, then New Hampshire would win him the election. The problem is with this, though, is that he's better off spending whatever money he could spend in New Hampshire into these other three states. For instance, had Trump in 2020 spent the money he put into North Carolina and put a lot of that into Georgia, he would have won that state with whatever shenanigans going on. Or if you put the money in New Hampshire and Minnesota in 2020 into Wisconsin, he probably would have won that state. You could extrapolate that to mean that also Arizona would have gone red with that money. And so you can kind of see how this all factors in. Now, obviously, the Trump money is more consolidated because the map is more favorable to him. And so he doesn't have to put money into states that he already should win, like Ohio or Iowa, for instance, in 2016 when it was more competitive. That being said, of course, when we look at the fundraising totals, these are also looking really good for Donald Trump, by the way. He outraised Joe Biden by a factor of about 30%, I believe, in this last month of April, which is evident and showing that the fundraising advantage that the Democrats historically have had for the past several decades is going to dissipate over time. Reason being that Joe Biden, of course, is a fundraiser. He sucks at it. The enthusiasm he drives in an audience of even old rich people is to say like, wow, this guy's so old. And that's coming from some billionaire that's also 70. And so keep that in mind, folks. So even consulting the polls, when we come to these last couple states, we can probably tell that New Hampshire's going blue just off the basis that it always does, and that Trump won't spend any money in there, which I recommend he doesn't either, because again, mathematically, it doesn't matter. It's more likely any money he spends in Nevada is going to go to good use towards flipping the state. And again, Nevada has 50% more votes than does New Hampshire. In fact, it has 6 electoral votes versus New Hampshire's 4. And so just lock in, boys. Now, of course, Wisconsin is a little more different because if only for the fact that it's only at a 0.1 percentage point. So out of all the swing states, out of Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, we see that it's only a 0.1 victory for Donald Trump. I don't believe these polls for a second, by the way. The reason why is because the aggregate is broken. You see how a Quinnipiac poll, for instance, has a 6% lead for Joe Biden, which is just absurd and asinine. It just doesn't even make sense, okay? Reason being is that we have all these other polls from a diverse set of different people. And we can see that it's a Trump +2, it's a tie, +1, +2, +1, +1, and then a +6 out of nowhere. So it's more evident that Trump's probably going to win the state as of right now by 1.5 and not Biden winning it by 0.1. Okay. Now, of course, we have the next state of Michigan. And when we consult that map, you'll notice that Trump is doing a little bit better by about a percentage of 1. And you can see that the distribution of these polls is also a lot more equitable, which makes a lot of sense. And so when you look at it that way, it's evident that Trump is still probably going to win this, but maybe not as much as Wisconsin, even though the polls say the exact opposite. But there's a couple things going for him. Of course, the god awful economy, the lack of, the blue collar Joe, that shtick won't land again like it did in 20. And of course, we have union support also falling through for Biden. And we also have this huge Gaza issue, which a lot of Arabs are going to sit out the election because of. Biden's kind of like reluctant pro-Israel stance and whatever have you. Now, when we look at other stuff like this, we also got one other state, and that's the Keystone State in Pennsylvania. Now, for whatever reason, this total is the most favorable to Trump, that being a 2.1 victory for Donald over Biden. And in fact, every single one of these most recent polls, aside from the Fox one, which is not the best pollster, has Trump winning by 2, 3, 4%, 1%. And so it's pretty evident he's going to win this state. Now, the logic precedes this actually, because even though the 2020 result shows that Michigan would be the least likely to be red, there's other things that are percolating. Like I said, the Middle East issue is kind of helping Trump a little bit. But even beyond that, again, Pennsylvania has a small, and not a small, but I mean like relative to Texas, it has a niche culture of fracking and shale oil production, which again, the Biden administration has done a horrible job advocating for and allowing for people to prosper economically in the state of Pennsylvania. And when we see a big divide in the American sector when it comes to demography, we see that blacks are just completely falling through the wayside in regards to Democratic support. It becomes more and more clear that the turnout we saw that was hyper intense in places like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh is not going to fucking happen again like it did in 2020. And so when blacks are not going to turn out in droves for you, old Joe, then it becomes evident that Trump's going to win on the back of the blue collar workers that were neglected by Joe Biden, whether it be the people that he kind of manipulated into thinking he was their homeboy when it came to Scranton Joe, that bull jive, or when we talk about, again, the blacks. These people do not want to vote for this old Mayo monk. No, okay, look, but listen, it's like so true though. Like Joe Biden has no sauce, and that turnout machine is going to go kabloom. It's over, bro. And so for all those reasons more, I personally think that Joe Biden is going to lose to Donald Trump. In fact, right now I have the election going 225 electoral votes for the Biden-Harris ticket to the 313,313, as in the Detroit area code, electoral votes for Donald Trump. It's going to be a bigger one than 2016 or 2020, obviously. And that being said, I think Trump's going to win this by basically the same map as 2016, if other for the fact that, of course, there was gerrymander. Well, not that, but the census reallocated the electoral vote, so it's a little different, plus Nevada on his column. And so it changes ever so slightly. That being said, I think he will win the popular vote by like 2 or 3%. But this is just accounting for a 1% win because I'm being a little bit cautious. Call me a turtle about this, but I'm playing it safe here. But see y'all. Wait, comment, like, and subscribe. And I'll see y'all on the other one. Let's go. Bye.